And thank you for being here. We want to get into NASA, and this is on the heels of just a phenomenally successful. It's extraordinary that you can take humans and machines and put them together and make them do wondrous things that will open up all new avenues of information about what the universe is, how long it's been there, what happened, and why we are where we are in this infinite space called the universe. So congratulations to you, Mr. Scolese, for an exceptional, successful journey, and we look forward to their return. The communication that Barbara Mikulski had with them from her committee was just outstanding, and you could see with the smiles on their faces in that extraordinarily clear photography just how much they are relishing success. I am going to put my opening statement in the record. We'll do the same for Senator Vitter. And Senator Vitter, you want to make any comments?
I just want to welcome the administrator and also congratulate him on his work in general in this mission. And I will also submit my statement to the record so we can have more time for discussion.
Okay. And what we're going to do is put your statement in the record as well. So if you don't mind, we will just go on and start our questions.
That's perfectly fine.
Senator Vitter.
Great. Again, thank you, Mr. Administrator, for being here. And we had a good meeting in my office recently, and thank you for that. I'm going to cover a little bit of that ground because I think it's important to discuss publicly. As I said in my office, I applaud the appointment of Norm Augustine, who has enormous background and credibility, to lead the current review that's going on right now. But I'm very concerned about he was formally given. He was told basically to review and look at options, but with the absolute constraint that the present budget numbers would be honored, and basically told not to consider anything above that line. Now, we obviously need to be aware of cost, and that needs to be part of the discussion. I'm not disputing that. But I think not to consider anything above a certain arbitrary line, even slightly above it. If you read the directive, that's what it says. I hope it's not acted upon in that spirit, but that's what it says. How can that review be full and adequate and completely productive with that arbitrary budget constraint?
Well, I think you characterized the intent of the review accurately, which is to go off and look at human spaceflight from now forward, look at extending the space station, and developing options to accomplish the goals of returning humans to the moon, getting Earth orbit, supporting the space station. And yes, there is as you said, a fiscal constraint to stay within the budget. But I think it's fair to say that Norm Augustine and the team is going to be looking at it, and if they can't find a solution that fits within the budget or an option that fits within the budget, then I'm sure they will provide other options.
Well, I mean, it seems to me there are clearly there has to be options that fit within the budget, but that in and of itself is a very constrained question. It seems to me the better question is, what are all of the options? What are the costs of all of the options? And then we can make a reasonable cost-benefit judgment based on what the option accomplishes and what the cost is. And there could be some very good options that might be slightly above that line. do you think in practice he will consider all of those options?
I think he will consider all of those options. Which ones he'll bring forward, I can't say, but I do think he will consider all those options.
Well, as I said I hope in practice the review is a little different than the directive on paper, because on paper the review basically says ignore anything above this arbitrary dollar line, and I think that is very limiting and counterproductive. Now, obviously, cost has to be considered, but let's understand all the reasonable options, the true cost of all the reasonable options, and then make good decisions.
No, understand that. Yes, sir.
Okay. The second big concern that we talked about in my office is that while this review is going on, and admittedly it's supposed to report pretty quickly in August, but while it's going on, contractors around the country, including in Michoud in Louisiana, are proceeding with plans, in some cases to lay off folks or to give notice to folks, which are premised on the old Bush administration stated policy that we're not going to fly the shuttle after 2010, basically no matter what. Now, that policy has changed as I understand it, and the present policy is that we're going to fly all of the planned missions, and we hope to fly them by 2010, but if it happens to slip a little bit, we'll deal with it, and we'll still fly them. What assurances can you give us that that new directive has gone to the contractors and they are being asked to stop any actions in the next few months which could basically get in the way of certain future options that Norm Augustine and his panel may very well suggest to us?
Certainly. First, let me say that, flying the shuttle safely is our number one priority. We must do that. And in order to do that, we need the people, the people that have been supporting this program for years, continue to support the program, are making the mission that's flying today a success. So we need all of those people to be there and support the program right up until we'll stop on the very last mission that flies, whenever that is. The way we're working that is, of course, working with our contractors and working internally to provide people with options. One, to retain the workforce. We're trying, wherever possible, to give people opportunities to work on the next program, the Constellation program, Orion and Ares. So they're working shuttle. They're also working Constellation activities. This way they know that when shuttle comes to an end, they will have something to go to. We're also making sure that we have the workforce that we need for each element to support that last shuttle flight. So we're retaining those people and those capabilities and those testing that we will need to fly that last one. We're also, and that we can do within NASA, and we can make sure that those people are there. We're also working with the contractor community and talking to them to get retention bonuses so that people will stay on. That hasn't proven to be a problem. This workforce is extremely dedicated, very loyal to the program, as you all well know. And in the interim, as we're working through all of these, I've spoken to Lockheed, and there will be no more notices for layoffs for at least until the fall, when we get through the review with the Augustine review panel. And we're working with them to minimize the amount of impact that will be coming by placing people on other contracts or retaining them in other activities within Lockheed. So we're working actively with the contractor community to retain the workforce and minimize the impacts.
Okay, specifically at Michoud in Louisiana, and I bring that up because I know a lot about it, not because it's the only important thing, but just as an example, we were told yesterday that there will still be notices that were planned a long time ago in June and or July. That's inconsistent with what you just said, so if we can figure out which is correct.
Well, I think there's two things being said.
Okay.
There were notices given earlier this year those will be affected in the June-July timeframe. Any new notice will be after that in the fall, and we're working with Lockheed to minimize the impact of those reductions.
Okay. We'll work with you to double check that, but
Okay.
that clarification would make sense. I just want to make sure that's what's going on.
Yeah.
And there aren't new notices starting June or July.
There are not new notices starting June or
Okay.
July.
Great. Along the same vein, why wouldn't it make sense for NASA, the administration, the Congress, whomever, all of the above, to reinstate the prohibition that expired on April 30th, at least until we get the Augustine panel report?
Well, as you know, we started the shuttle retirement back in 2005 and stopped the production. Well, didn't stop production. We didn't continue production of elements that we didn't need to carry out the manifest as we understood it. So it's been going on since then. The activities that we've done now is we've delivered the last tank, or are in the process of delivering the last tank for the final shuttle mission, as well as we're in the process of completing the final mission and other activities. So as we as we complete those activities, we need to stop because we don't have the materials to produce additional tanks. But what we are doing is we're making sure that we're keeping the people that we need to service those equipment should there be a problem, to analyze issues should there be an issue, and to maintain those until, as I said, the last flight. So it's not a complete stoppage, if you will. We're trying to do it in a very logical and methodical and sensible way so that we can be prepared to deal with any issue that may come up as we fly out the manifest.
Okay. That's all I have for now, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Vitter. Mr. Scolese, do you believe that there's any way that we can meet President Obama's commitment to a human mission to the moon by 2020, given the numbers that came out last week from OMB?
We're still looking at that, but I can say very truthfully that it's going to be challenging to meet that to the original plan that we had before.
I agree. And I would echo what Senator Vitter said about the out years numbers, and I have shared my dissatisfaction with Dr. Orzag and Dr. Holdren about that. But I am very optimistic that someone of Norm Augustine's quality and his experience is going to see through that, and he's going to recommend what he legitimately thinks should be. And so in that regard, I'm not as concerned as you are, Senator Vitter, that Dr. Augustine will feel like that he's constrained to use their numbers, because you simply can't do everything that NASA has to do to leave those out-year numbers. What is NASA's estimate of probability of completing the remaining missions on the space shuttle by the end of, well, let's make it easier, calendar year 2010?
Well, actually, I don't think I have that number. I have it till September of 2010, and as you know, how we work the manifest. And I'd have to get you the exact numbers, but it's on the order of between 50 and 70% confidence that we can complete those missions by September 2010, depending on which model that one uses. And looking at a deterministic model where we actually just put in the data, so one is a probabilistic, the other is a deterministic, we have actually some margin to the September 2010 date. But of course, as you well know, we have to look at it essentially every week to make sure that that parts are coming in when they're supposed to be coming in, and that we're not having any issues. And of course, we have been known to have weather well. So we have to work all those things. But our probabilistic models indicate that we can do it, and our deterministic model indicates that we can make that time frame. But again, it's not the date anymore. We intend to fly out the manifest.
Which is what the commitment from the White House.
That's correct. Yes.
And they have publicly stated that commitment. I just want to I want to put on the record, though, since the Columbia disaster, what's the most number of missions that we've flown in a year?
I think we'll have to get that for the record. I believe it was 8, but I could, or since the Columbia disaster, I'm sorry, no. I believe it was 4 or 5.
I think the record will show 4. Now, we are now in May of 2009, and there are 8 missions remaining. How many would be flown between now and September the 30th of this year?
We've flown 4 missions between now and September 30th.
Of the 4 missions of the
for
8?
This year, we will have flown 1. At the completion of this mission, we'll have flown 2 this calendar year. We have 1 scheduled for June, 1 scheduled for August, and we had 1 before that. So in the fiscal year, it'll be 5.
Okay, but between now and September the 30th,
we'll have 2 more missions.
2 more missions. So that leaves you 6 remaining.
Yes.
And you're saying that the probability is, did you say 70%? You said 50 to 70%.
That's correct.
That you could fly the remaining 6 missions within a 12-month period.
That's correct.
But you would never sacrifice any question of safety to get those 6 off.
That's right. Schedule has not been a priority. It is safe flight of the shuttle and its crews. We have to do that in order to do anything in space. So safety of flight is our number 1 priority. It will determine when we fly ultimately. And, our models are just that. Sir, they're just models.
Will you notify us immediately if your assessment of probability changes?
Yes, we keep routine updates of the manifest, and we'll continue to provide those. And if we see that we're not going to make it, we'll notify everybody when we start to see that.
Now, you have been negotiating a contract with the Russians to provide launch services after the retirement of the shuttle. Does that have a firm fixed date at which those launch services would start?
I'd have to go off and look and see if it's a firm fixed date, but it will begin after the completion of the shuttle to carry crew, to the station and bring them back. As you know, we've been relying on Soyuz since the beginning of the station program for crew rescue. And in the aftermath of the Columbia disaster, we were, of course, transported on Soyuz. So we've been relying on Soyuz for some time, but you're correct. It will be, following the retirement of the shuttle, we'll be relying on Soyuz exclusively to carry crew to and from the station as well as for rescue.
So the start date is not a problem. It's entirely dependent upon the length of time that the shuttle flies.
I will have to look specifically at the provisions. I can't tell you that off the top of my head. As you know, we're still in the process of completing that contract. So I'll have to take that one for the record and get back to you.
All right. And now, it has been reported in the press that you're negotiating a price of $51 million per seat.
That's correct.
And what do we pay per seat now?
Approximately $47 million per seat.
Per seat. And when was that price concluded?
It was in the last agreement, which I'd have to, again, get you the exact date of when that was done, but that's been probably since, I'll have to get you the exact date. I don't have it off the top of my head. The services, though, are for training, the flight to and from the station, and rescue capability, and any of the provisions that are required for a long duration flight.
And how many seats is NASA committed to buy?
We are committed, I believe, to buy 6 seats.
And for example, is that you take 3 up on a Soyuz?
Well, we don't pay for the Russians, so the cosmonauts would be theirs, and we pay for our crew members that we're responsible for, which would include NASA members, ESA, and JAXA member, our partner members that we're responsible for.
In last year's authorization bill, there was guidance to NASA about COTS-D, Space Act agreements, to develop a U.S. commercial alternative to Soyuz. And we authorized $150 million in funding for COTS-D. Now, I noticed that you're putting $150 million of stimulus funds toward commercial crew and cargo program, but not actually initiating COTS-D agreements. Why are you not initiating these Space Act agreements?
Well, we are working the commercial program as you defined. There was cargo on it. We have those 2 contracts with SpaceX and Orbital to do cargo. We had one for COTS-D. I can't recall a specific $150 million to go on to COTS-D. We did this year in the stimulus identify $150 million to stimulate a commercial activity, and it's broken into 2 pieces. $70 million to go off and develop capabilities that any visiting vehicle would need, including commercial vehicles. And that includes developing the human spaceflight rating requirements, the requirements that you need to be certified for human spaceflight. As you well know, we build human spacecraft and design them so infrequently that we have to write those requirements down. So part of this is to make those available to everybody, make them understandable to everybody, and that will help not only the commercial providers broadly, but all of us. And then $80 million to stimulate activity for a commercial crew.
We have 7 minutes left in the vote. I'm going to recess the committee, and I'll be right back.
Okay.
Thank you. the committee will resume. Now, I want to go back to the question that I had asked you earlier. You described the breakdown of how you intend to program $150 million for commercial crew and cargo. And instead of putting the dollars into the various component pieces that would enable crew ability, would it not make more sense just to invest that in a milestone-based demonstration flight?
We discussed that, and we believe that we need to take a measured approach to developing commercial crew. As you know, again, it's a very difficult prospect to develop a crewed vehicle to carry crew safely to and from from space, let alone rendezvous and dock with the space station. So we're working a measured development where we work progressively from developing the capability to get into space, to conduct the rendezvous and docking with the space station, to crew rescue, which can be done without having to worry about crew escape, all the way up to carrying crew. And that's the philosophy that we're working to achieve. To do that, we needed to do some things that broadly help the community that wants to do this, as I mentioned earlier, about developing concise specs and understanding specs and standards so that we can safely put our crew on those vehicles. And further, I think you've seen the annual report of the Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel that had some questions about the detail of our human rating requirements. So that's all part of what we're trying to accomplish. And we believe that will get us a commercial crew capability quicker and safer than if we were to just go off and suggest that we fund a capability.
But that wasn't what the legislation said. The legislation said that $150 million was funding for COTS D. And in this case, you would not even have to pay until the COTS D partner was able to successfully demonstrate that capability. Isn't that right?
It would be dependent upon how we structured it. And of course, we wanted to maximize competition for the vehicle. And as you know, there's only one COTS D. Well,
when I say you, I'm referring to NASA, and you were not the acting administrator at the time. This is an example of where NASA has not followed the legislation. Now, let me ask you this. Would $150 million be enough to demonstrate that capability?
We'd have to look at it, but I don't think so, sir.
Well, what do you think it would be?
I'd have to get back to you on that, but it'd be several times that, I would expect. Because recall, we have to develop not only the crew portion of it, we have to develop the life support systems, the launch escape systems, the recovery systems. All of those have to be developed and demonstrated. And $150 million doesn't seem enough to do that.
Well, we had a unique opportunity. If NASA had listened and followed the law, we had a unique opportunity this year between the 2009 operating plan and the additional funds provided by this bill and the development of the 2010 budget to craft a COTS D plan that would have funded the program at the level that the folks needed. And that path was not pursued. NASA did not obey the law. And I'm saying, I'm not saying it to you because you're the acting administrator since January the 20th. But I want to point this out that sometimes NASA doesn't want itself to be helped. And in the process, we've got to get our act together. Senator Vitter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just go back briefly to these layoffs and WARN Act notices. Because we've gotten conflicting signals from this discussion and some previous discussions, and I just want to nail that down, hopefully here, if not as follow-up. I think you said there would be no new WARN Act notices from Lockheed between now and the report. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, we have a briefing page from NASA, which isn't necessarily inconsistent with that, but it says companies are expected to issue additional WARN Act notices over the next several months. Now, that may not be Lockheed, but are they expected from other contractors between now and the report? And is that advisable given that we don't know what the report will recommend?
Well, sir, we have to be careful in how we report. I'm not sure which report you're looking at, but you're looking at the October, I think October of last year's report, which could be referencing that. In which case,
in terms of WARN Act notices, I'm looking at a little NASA briefing. Oh, in terms of now in the report, I'm talking about the Augustine report.
No, I understand, but I don't know what the date of that report.
This is a briefing dated yesterday.
Yesterday, okay. I haven't seen that briefing, so it's hard for me to comment on it. We, of course, don't know when necessarily WARN Act notices, or if they're even necessarily related to the shuttle, but we do work closely with the contractor community to understand what's going on. It probably would be better for me to explain what we're doing and how we're coordinating, and then I'll go back and find out exactly what you're looking at and get you a specific answer to that question. As I was saying, we're working hard to make sure that we retain the workforce that we need within NASA for the civil servants, where we have direct control of what's going on. We don't anticipate a loss of workforce. We anticipate a shift of the workforce as we move from shuttle to Constellation. To affect that and to keep people working, we are making sure that we have incentives to retain the people that we need who may want to retire, to encourage them to stay a little bit longer until we can fly out the shuttle. That hasn't been a problem. To provide people with career paths, job opportunities on Constellation, so they know they have a place to go to when the shuttle goes away, but they know their prime job is to fly the shuttle. This is an extremely workforce, a civil service workforce is an extremely dedicated workforce that's doing a great job. On the contractor side, we're trying to do the same thing. We have less control, of course, so we work with the contractor community to provide opportunities where we can, and to encourage the contractors to provide opportunities for these people as they win contracts. We provide retention bonuses, funding to accomplish that so that people can stay, and provide support for retraining where that is appropriate. The contractors have been very good at trying to place people when there are displacements that are needed. And from what I can tell, they've done a very good job. Our estimates have always been high, so less people have been impacted than we have projected. But as for the specific data that you have there, I have not seen it. I apologize for that.
Sure.
I'll have to go back and look at it.
If we can follow up, but just so that I can frame the question, this is from NASA yesterday about WARN Act notices, and it says companies are expected to issue additional WARN Act notices over the next several as shuttle manufacturing activities continue to wind down. So it's shuttle related, not necessarily Lockheed. So your previous statement may be true, but it's shuttle, but it does seem to be between now and the Augustine report. And so my question is, does that make sense between now and the Augustine report, when the Augustine report may suggest something that these actions make either impossible or very expensive to do?
Understand, and we don't, and again, I'll get you the specifics because I can't do that here, but we know that there's nothing that will make it impossible.
Well, nothing's impossible. But if something becomes triply expensive, it might as well be impossible.
I didn't say it wouldn't be expensive. I just said it wouldn't be impossible.
That's my point.
I understand.
That's exactly my point. as a practical matter, would be impossible. Now, we've been talking a lot about shuttle. The other way to close the gap is from the other direction. And for instance, for Ares 5 and Altar development, that was originally start in 2011, I believe, and that's now beginning in 2013. What's the possibility of shifting that back closer to 2011? Is that a possibility, and at what cost?
Well, certainly for Ares 5 and Altair, it is possible to move those developments up. I would point out that for Ares 5, we're actually making progress as we work on Ares 1 because there's common elements. The Ares 1 utilizes the same solid or a similar solid to what the Ares 5 is planning on using, and the upper stage engine, the J2X, is the same between the Ares 1 and the Ares 5. So as we're working on Ares 1, we're also working on the Ares 5. But of course, if additional resources were available, we could in fact move up both of those activities. I believe they were really to start in earnest more in the 2012 timeframe. But again, we can go off and look more into that.
Okay. Final question for now. In the past, there's been some discussion that, in my opinion, exaggerated safety concerns about shuttle, use of the PRA tool and other things. Most recently, NASA's formal opinion is that there is a 98.7% probability of safely executing each flight planned as of now. Is that NASA's current confident estimation bottom line?
That number isn't familiar to me. Are you looking at the range of numbers there?
I'm looking at a NASA report, page 9. Which report is it? It's the Shuttle Extension Report, page 9.
Okay.
That says the latest Space Shuttle Probabilistic Risk Assessment, PRA, indicates that the single mission risk for loss of crew and vehicle is 1 in 77. Stated another way, and this is what I quoted, there's a 98.7% probability of safely executing each flight.
Mm-hmm.
So is that NASA's current bottom line?
Yes. There's in the appendix of that report, there's a variance that shows our confidence level in those numbers. And while the PRA is a good indicator, it isn't the only indicator. The shuttle is a very complex vehicle to operate, and I think that's the best way to describe it, and that report describes that as well. And it's an aging vehicle as well, so it's more than just what's the probability that all the pieces are going to work. It's the probability and it's the likelihood that we're going to be able to deal with all of those issues as they come up. So, yeah, the numbers that you quoted are exactly right, but our uncertainty, which is in the appendix of that report, shows that there's a reasonably large error associated with those numbers, or error bar, as we call it, associated with those numbers.
Okay, that's all I have right now, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Isaacson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize for missing your testimony and being late. I really was anxious to hear it. I just really have a couple of questions. The last shuttle flights are next year, is that right?
That's correct.
And the budget request that I show here is $18.68 billion in 2010, and basically roughly the same amount of money over the 4 years succeeding. Is that a sufficient amount to develop the next generation craft that will fly?
It will allow us to proceed on the development of those vehicles. Yes, it was asked earlier if that would support the 2020 lunar landing, and I stated then, and I'll state again, that would be a challenge. We're still in the process of evaluating what the budget represents in terms of human lunar return, and the time frame for that. So talking about 2020 date, that would be a real challenge to make the 2020 date with that funding level.
But development of the vehicle and test flying it in orbital test missions is achievable. It's going to the moon by 2020.
Yes. In fact, the budget provides us a greater opportunity to make the 2015 initial operational capability that we were talking about. The budget provides us funding in the early years where we really need it to get the initial operational capability, where we end up with, in the Constellation program, the program that's developing those vehicles, approximately $630 million additional in 9 and 10. So that provides us greater assurance of making that 2015 initial operational capability.
When the shuttle stops flying next year and the next generation is in development, there's about a 5-year period in there. Are the Russians going to do all the shuttling back and forth to the space station?
Yes.
Will we fly with them?
Yes.
Okay. And that's, I guess, that's out of, is it Kazakhstan where they go out of?
Yes, they fly out of Kazakhstan. Yes.
The China. One other question. There's been some written about the Chinese space program and their goal to go to the moon. How vibrant and rich is their space program right now? From
what we know, their space program is very vibrant and very rich. They are doing a lot, and they certainly have significant capabilities. We don't actually know what their ultimate objectives are, but they certainly are building a capability that would allow them to go to the moon if they chose to at some point in the future.
And my reason for asking is I think it's space. I'm fascinated by space exploration and envious of the chairman and his experience in so doing. But I think we must remain competitive in the advancement of space. We reacted to the Soyuz quickly, not the Soyuz, but Sputnik quickly in the 60s. I was around then and remember that day when we thought we were behind and we leapt ahead. And I think it's important for us to remain competitive and stay ahead critically in the best interest of this country. So I appreciate what you do and thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Senator Isaacson, you were not here when we talked about the administration has committed to continue to fly the space shuttle for the remaining 8 flights until the space station completed. NASA says it has a probability of 50 to 70% likelihood that they could fly out all of those shuttles by the end of 2010. There are considerable number of folks, yours truly, that feel like that is not a realistic flight schedule. And we provided for that in the budget resolution that we passed by adding another $2.5 billion in budget authority and outlays in fiscal year 2011 should the shuttle have to continue to fly in 2011 to complete the space station. The budget that you have submitted, that the President has submitted, identifies $400 million in shuttle retirement costs not previously accounted for, and it transfers those funds from the exploration budget. Now, does that $400 million include retention incentives to retain critical workforce personnel until the final shuttle mission is completed?
I would anticipate that it does. I have to look at the exact details, but it's intended for that. Transition and retirement would include those, yes.
Okay. Would you get back to on that?
Yes.
All right. Do you anticipate additional closeout and retirement costs being identified over and above the $400 million?
There could be, though. That is an estimate based on what we know today. So there could be additional costs as we learn more about what needs to be done. But that's our best estimate as of today.
In last year's authorization bill, we emphasized the importance of the ISS as a national laboratory. and it was Senator Hutchinson about 5 years ago who, in the NASA authorization bill back then, had first made that designation of the space station as a national laboratory. And in that authorization bill, we directed NASA to develop a national lab management plan. And we emphasized in there KSC's Space Life Science Lab as an asset of the Space Station National Lab. Is there any effort underway to develop a separate funding line for an ISS National Lab activities?
We are working the ISS as a national lab, and we've identified resources in the Constellation program and the station program to do that. I guess the answer is yes. We are doing that.
Okay, would you get back to us with the details on that?
Yes, we can do that.
For the space station to function as a national laboratory, it's got to have the ability to bring cargo back, the down capability. Now, obviously, we're going to be limited once the shuttle is retired in that down mass capability. What is NASA going to do to address that need?
We're working the down mass capability, or the down mass, with our partners, of course, and also with the commercial cargo to go off and address that. So we have a plan. We are working our plans to go off and develop that. It'll be an evolving activity as the commercial cargo comes online. Our ability to work with the Soyuz and with our European and Japanese allies on pulling this all off. So that's an evolving capability that we'll be working. But you're absolutely right. I mean, as we use ISS more and more, and as you know, we're getting a 6-person crew beginning this month. So we're starting now to use ISS for what it was intended, as a laboratory. And in the near term, we'll be able to use the shuttle, and in the longer term, we'll have to use new capabilities until we get to full-up capability with Orion and be able to carry down about the equivalent down mass that we got with the shuttle.
And so until you get Orion, your down mass capability is only Soyuz?
And whatever we can develop with the commercial capabilities and with our European and Japanese colleagues.
Well, how far along in their development are they?
Not very far along. Well, they're far along in delivery of capability. In terms of down mass, that's still a capability that has to be developed.
So we really don't have a down mass capability except what you can stick in
Soyuz. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's hardly any, because you haven't got a lot of room in there to cram anything in, do you?
Well, there's some room, but we're also looking at ways of accomplishing the goals that would be achieved by bringing down mass down, by doing it on the space station and getting that data downlinked to the Earth in effective ways. As you know, we do that with our robotic spacecraft that are sitting there on Mars doing experiments. Here we have the capability of having people do it and collecting the data and downlinking that as well. So we're looking at many ways of bringing the information back if we can't bring the samples back. So we're going to do both. We're going to try and bring the samples back to the best ability that we can, and we're going to evolve as we learn more and more. And in the absence of being able to bring the samples back, we're going to get the data back in a way that the researchers on the ground can use it effectively.
Would you share the specifics of that with us? That sounds very promising. If you can do data links and bring them back, what you need. Share with us what we're going to sacrifice in the way of down mass until we get Orion.
Okay, we can provide that information to you.
All right. Now, as you should have been briefed, the last year's authorization bill required a number of reports from NASA. And one of the overdue reports is to identify other federal programs that can use the workforce and facilities that will be used, that will become available. Shuttle retires. Happens to be some facilities in New Orleans. There happens to be some facilities in the Kennedy Space Center and others. Now, that report was due in March, and this is the end of May. When can we expect that report?
I'll have to look back. I thought it should be available in the next month.
NASA has based its Ares 1 Orion initial operating capability date as March 2015 on a 65% confidence calculation. Is that IOC date still based on that confidence level?
That is the confidence level that we are targeting. We develop our confidence level as we're at approximately the preliminary design review, which is scheduled for being early next year. That's the time when we will say specifically what date and what confidence level. However, all of our indications right now are that we are working towards that date and that confidence level, March of 2015, and 65% confidence level. But we still have more work to do to validate that.
Okay, 65%. All right. Now, there seem to be a number of changes that you're considering in the Orion spacecraft in order to improve the chances that you're going to make that 2015 date. One change includes cutting the crew from 6 to 4. When do you expect to make a decision on those changes?
Again, those are all part of the preliminary design review, which is going on right now. The changes, for the most part, are to improve performance and improve reliability of the vehicle. In any design process, one wants to sit down and go off and understand that. I've not given up a 6-person crew. What we are doing is we are looking at the design. We're looking at what we need to do in order to support the initial operational capability so we can provide higher confidence. We're looking at the design to see where we can make improvements. One of the 2 areas of improvement that are worth mentioning that resulted in design changes are the launch abort system, where we revised that to more effectively cover the crew module so that we can reduce acoustic loads, which makes it safer and better for the crew as they're on ascent, and makes it better if they have to abort. We also changed the power system so that it would be more reliable in orbit during the mission, so that we could have a higher confidence of completing the mission. So many of these changes are being done as we're learning what it is that we're doing in this design process. And it has to be remembered that we still haven't completed our preliminary design of this vehicle yet. So there may still be other changes. They're getting smaller and smaller as we get smarter and smarter and we get further along on the design.
And when is that design review?
It's scheduled for the early next year time frame when it's all going to be complete. We do it in stages. We do the elements and then we do the entire system. So we'll do Ares, we'll do Orion. In fact, we've done Ares already. We'll do Orion later this summer, early fall. And then we'll do the entire system where we look at the ground system, the spacecraft, the launch vehicle, and all the associated elements in the early part of next year.
I want to ask you a question specifically about the workforce at the Kennedy Space Center. Initially, you were going to absorb some of the job losses when the shuttle is retired, which you say is going to be in 2010. I think it's going to be in 2011. And that they were going to be absorbed by the work on the lunar lander. Now, given that the present numbers that came out from the President's office in the out year essentially eliminates some of that out year lunar funding, when do you expect to have any updated workforce projections? And let me say parenthetically that question may be, and I hope it will be answered by Dr. Augustine in his report.
Well, that was going to be my answer. So we will provide an updated workforce for FY10 only. That's another one of the reports that you were mentioning. Next month, we'll only look at 10 because we do have the budget being looked at, the program being looked at. And then at the completion of the review this summer, we will update those workforce numbers as well as the entire plan, if so needed. But we'll update the plan based on the results of the review.
When do you expect that we will see the report on the mishap investigation and recommendation regarding the orbiting carbon observatory?
That's still in work. It's proven to be a more difficult investigation than we all thought. The teams are working that. I would hope we have that done before the end of the summer, but it is taking longer. The problem has proven to be more difficult to identify and resolve than was originally assumed. But it's important to recognize it was a launch vehicle fairing issue that we're working. It wasn't associated with the spacecraft or the instrument.
Another delay was no fault of NASA's, and that was the Solar Dynamics Observatory and the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, and that's because they've had problems with Atlas V launch slots. But that costs NASA money.
Yes, it does.
How much?
Well, we'll get you the exact numbers, but it's in the tens of millions of dollars. LRO and SDO are in different, but we'll get you the specific numbers. And SDO is still TBD, of course, so we can't give a final number until we actually have a launch date solidified. Right now, we're hoping that we can get it launched in October.
You need to know that I think that this committee ultimately, with regard to a very important satellite used by a lot of communities, including defense, the INPOS, I think that you're going to see our recommendations to get to those problems, that NASA take more of the lead. And I have been visiting with the Air Force about how they need to let you all be the lead on this. In light of the independent review team recommendations, what does NASA see to be the best future options for INPOS?
Well, the independent review team recommended that there be a restructuring to have more independent oversight, insight, and into the development of that vehicle, and we agree with that. So whether NASA provides that capability, as you're suggesting, or whether the Air Force does that, it needs to be done. That's the critical piece, I think, that's being missed. And I believe the other recommendation they made was coming down and having everybody have a common understanding of what the requirements and the goals are for this mission. And we all need to get aligned on those goals, or else it'll be very difficult to resolve issues as they come up.
You are initiating a green aircraft initiative that will work to reduce the fuel burn, the noise, and the emissions. Will it also include aviation biofuels?
Yes, that's a component of the activity. The intent is to look at the entire chain, if you will, the airspace system as well as the vehicle systems, to come up with a broader, more capable solution, solving it in trying to find a solution in one area to reduce fuel or to reduce our dependence on a fuel type. Isn't probably going to yield the advantage that would happen by looking at it as a complete system where we adjust the aircraft system, the avionics, the air traffic control system, and how we fly our airplanes. So the intent of the program is to look at all of those things and bring those all together into a system approach to the answer to obtain better fuel efficiency, better safety, and biofuels would be a portion of that.
In your budget, a part that took a serious reduction is center management and operations. Do you think this is going to significantly impact the field center's ability to perform needed facilities maintenance?
It is a challenge for us, and it was an area that we adjusted based on our budget priorities. And it will have an impact. We are addressing that. We made it a priority last year to go off and prioritize our facility needs and our facility activities. Continued reduction in that would be a serious problem. So we're looking at that very closely to minimize future impacts. We have a plan that's laid out now that we believe will allow us to effectively manage our centers, but we can't afford to change it very much from where we are today.
I promised you that I was going to get you out of here by 4 o'clock, and it is 7.5 minutes until 4 o'clock. We want you to know how much we appreciate your public service and all of the NASA team. And we have to bore in on what we think are the shortcomings, but that does not at all diminish in the hearty congratulations for the continuing can-do spirit and the teamwork that results in successes like we've just seen. So that is extraordinary, and we commend you for it. What we're going to increasingly do with this new administration is hold NASA accountable. When we ask for reports, we expect those reports as the separate legislative branch and to have them on time instead of the slow walk that has occurred in the past. And that's the way that we can have the legitimate sharing of information that we have to have between the legislative and executive branches in order to make and to continue this as a successful space program. And without objection, Senator Hutchinson's opening statement will be entered into the record. And thank you all, and the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.